It's really heartwarming to see this tremendous group here on a Thursday afternoon in Susanville. Fantastic for you for having the event, and thank you for all being here. And I'm going to pass off the microphone to your district attorney, Stacey, Montgomery.
So, just in case you don't know, I'm your district attorney here in Lassen County, and I am so proud to be your district attorney. And I consider it a privilege to be here today supporting this cause. And I choose to stand up today and say, not in my city. Sex trafficking, human trafficking, is a worldwide epidemic. But thanks to groups such as Courage Worldwide and courageous individuals who are willing to put themselves out there, like Dawn Hirschberger and Dawn Maddox, who's here today, the issue is being brought to the fore. Awareness is being raised, communities are being educated, criminals are being prosecuted, and victims are receiving assistance to move on towards productive lives. I've been an attorney for over 20 years now, and I started out in school with a passion for justice and a drive to see victims made whole. Unfortunately, with changing laws making it easier for criminals, sometimes it's difficult to feel as though justice is being accomplished. And it is much easier these days to get discouraged. But all hope is not lost. We have to keep up the good fight and do something to make a difference. Anything to make a difference. And by you being here today, you are making a difference. Mother Teresa said, God doesn't require us to succeed. He only requires that we try. She also said, I alone cannot change the world, but I can cast a stone across waters to create many ripples. It's those ripples that change lives and transform people. By being here today, you're casting your stone. By agreeing with this proclamation, you're creating the ripples that change lives. I'm here to define the problem for the state of California. What does our law say about human trafficking here in California? This is sort of the clinical portion. It's defined in Penal Code Section 236.1, and it basically is depriving someone of their personal liberty with the intent to obtain forced labor or services from them. Sounds very clinical. Unfortunately, the problem is very ugly. Depriving someone of their personal liberty with the intent to violate California's pimping and pandering laws, pornography laws, laws against extortion and blackmail, and certain other California laws concerning commercial sex activity and sexual exploitation of children, or persuading or trying to persuade a minor to engage in a commercial sex act with the intent to violate one of those same laws is a crime here in California. In 2012, the voters passed Proposition 35, which was a step in the right direction. Californians Against Sexual Exploitation is the name of the act. This act provided for new penalties for people convicted of violating Penal Code 236.1. Thankfully, human trafficking is always a felony here in California. If you're convicted of human trafficking, in order to obtain forced labor, you can face 5, 8, or 12 years in California state prison and up to a fine of $500,000. If you're convicted of trafficking in order to commit a crime related to commercial sex, child pornography, or extortion, you can face 8, 14, or 20 years in the state prison, and again, a fine of up to $500,000. And you will have to register as a sex offender. Finally, if you persuade a minor to engage in commercial sex acts, you could receive 5 to 12 years or 15 years to life in prison and a $500,000 fine. There are many aspects to human trafficking in California, nationwide, and worldwide. There are fines and civil penalties, and there are so many offenses related to it that also carry penalties, and we've talked about those briefly: pimping, pandering, procurement of a child under 16 for lewd and lascivious acts, and the list goes on. If the charges are that you use force, fear, fraud, deceit, coercion, violence, duress, menace, or threat of unlawful injury to the victim or another person to commit this offense, the potential prison sentence is 15 years to life. There are also additional prison terms for great bodily injury and if you have prior convictions for the same type of offense. And thankfully, with all the changes that we've had in California, this is still a state prison offense. So if somebody commits one of these crimes, they are actually going to go to state prison. It's not subject to realignment like so many of the laws are now. In addition to the penalties that I've outlined, there could also be fines of up to $1 million, thanks to Proposition 35. The victim can bring a civil lawsuit against the perpetrator and receive treble damages, which is triple the damages that they've incurred. You can also be subject to asset forfeiture, meaning if you've gained any property, if you've gained an income from this and you've purchased property, you can lose that property that you've gained by these illicit activities. People lose their vehicles, real estate, money, and any other property that's used to facilitate the crime. So now that we know what the penalties are, we need to know what are some of the problems associated with prosecution. Why is the problem so pervasive? Well, it's because of this. The challenges presented in the course of investigating and prosecuting human trafficking can be extremely daunting. Among the most common and difficult of these obstacles is the inability or unwillingness of a victim to testify. This reluctance may be based on a variety of factors, including the victim's fear, shame, distrust of law enforcement, and a real or perceived lack of alternatives to trafficking as a way of life. Sometimes the unwilling victims to participate arise from their relationship with their traffickers, who may exploit love and intimate relationships to recruit their victims. The undercurrents in such cases involve many of the same dynamics prevalent in dating, intimate partner relationships, sexual violence, and child abuse. Also present, however, is the trafficker's significant financial interest in the victims, as well as the trafficker's increased exposure to state and federal charges if detected. Accordingly, trafficking victims face enormous pressure not to engage the criminal justice system, and they have potentially very negative consequences if they do. Another problem is corroboration. Corroboration of the crime is a huge problem, especially if a victim chooses not to participate. Anytime, with any type of crime, if a victim chooses not to participate in the prosecution of their case, the people have a much harder time obtaining a conviction. Our burden of proof is high, and it's not easily met, especially without the testimony of the victim. So a collaborative approach is necessary between the advocates and the agencies involved. It's difficult to identify the victims of trafficking. Often they're hiding in plain sight. When they're identified, there are very complex legal issues involved. Relevant issues include organized crime, narcotics, gangs, child abuse, sexual violence, and intimate partner violence. All of these issues need to be addressed, and each has its own area of expertise. The cases are lengthy, time-consuming, and expensive, and often require the coordination of counties, state, and federal agencies. The victims have needs that are difficult to address, including victim support, psychological, sexual, or other relevant trauma counseling. It's often needed along with financial assistance, professional or vocational skill building, life skills training, housing, and healthcare. Unfortunately, support services and other resources such as safe houses are in short supply. A condition often attributable to the failure of communities to recognize human trafficking. Even communities committed to the development and delivery of necessary support services to victims confront the challenge of limited and decreasing financial resources. Collaboration allows communities to maximize their resources. Each community, including our own, must start somewhere. Our first step here in Lassen County, here in Susanville, we can make a start by proclaiming together, not in my city, not in my state. Each of us alone may not be able to change the world, but we can each cast our stone. So join with me today, and let's go out and make a ripple in the pond.
Well, that was amazing. That was better said than anything I could even think of, because you are the ripple in the pond, and we are the beginning. Just letting you know, Stephanie was on the radio last night and mentioned it. There are only three other counties that are saying, not my city, not my state. Los Angeles, Sacramento, Elk Grove, and now Lassen County. So give me a round.